Austraeoh by Imploding Colon, read by Deathlight, Chapter 147, Easterly. Rainbow hadn't even considered the dark steam possessed the landscape until the city started to break up. Staring beneath her, she saw wide plains of brown brush dissolving into gray stone. The air was becoming dry, and the earth was sharing the acrid sediments. As the buildings disappeared, so did the rivers and tributaries, so that the landscape evolved into a desolate valley of polished stone and inert rock. The only trace of civilization was a long, straight series of highways stretching from New Ring to the eastern horizon, almost acting as a line for Rainbow to follow. As she skimmed along the ground, she gazed in wonder as the asphalt and concrete panels that made of the highway illuminated themselves from underneath with bright blue beams of energy. In a way, the juice from the opposites was following her, even as she soared miles and miles from the heart of the pit in New Ring. Neato, she muttered, smirking to herself. Though the air was dry, it was anything but still. Sharp mountains from the north and south produced strong currents of air that funneled through the valley at merciless speed. If Rainbow flew high enough, she could easily escape the wrath of the lower troposphere. Instead, she maintained a humble altitude, relishing in the exercise that the strong currents was forcing her to endure. For days, she had been forced not to use her wings for the fear of gun turrets or uptight unicorns. Right now, she was outrisking a blue glow and having the time of her life. The day of Darkstenian travel wore on, and the blue glow beneath her didn't fade. As she passed over neighborhoods and clustered communities of metal foundations, she watched the blue light caught up and re-energized the buildings with unearthly locomotion. Gears came to life, wheels started to turn, and giant clock towers began clicking once again. She heard the murmur of astonishment and subdued rapture from the unicorns below. Holding her breath, Rainbow twirled about and kept flying eastward. The lavender glow didn't fade either. In a way, the light had always been there, but it felt more permanent now than when she first left Windthrow. She also couldn't help but think that White Mane had a hoof and how swiftly she recovered from her exposure to the red flame atop the golden pedestal and mechanical belly of the world. Rainbow bit her lip. She gazed down at the arid world blurring by. As she passed an elevated series of hills, she dropped low and dragged the tips of her hooves over the tall grass and topsoil. She felt the dust of the earth spreading from her gliding touch. She smelled the pollen of the vegetation. Every memory of every winter wrap-up flickered through her mind like lightning. It was daunting to think that everything that was alive grew off the back of something that was artificial as a can opener. But even then, Rainbow knew very little. And though the idea both intrigued and frightened her, she was no egghead. In a few seconds, she was thinking about the sick move she pulled on Duke Zobn at her in the pits. A chuckle escaped her lips, and she barreled into an upwards glide that took her over a sudden mountain ridge. The highway ended, finally. The road stopped at a slightly larger township bottled against a large white dam. The one and only river of East Darkstein fed a meager wealth of power to the community, only to be doubled by the glow once it reached its ultimate destination, and absorbed itself into mechanical buildings. Then, as the sun set, red and filmy over the stone landscape, the unicorn town disappeared behind Rainbow's tail, along with the blue light and the last sign of her most recent heroism. Rainbow kept flying even as night fell, purple and dark, over her flapping wings. There were no lights out here, save for the stars above. The world was a black stretch of emptiness beneath the stellar canopy. It was darker than in a Marilyn, or even the snowy mountains before. Just like the mountains though, it was cold, insanely cold. She hadn't truly taken into account she was legitimately in a desert now. and the temperature was only bound to drop like an anvil once the sun went down. Of recent advents that taught Rainbow Dash anything, it was that she was made out of strong stuff. Still, she was anything but a machine. She knew this. She'd even gotten one to smile before taking off. She realized she had to retire for the night, not so much for the sake of sleep, but for the sake of keeping herself from freezing. As 2 hours went by, she realized she could start making out the rough shape of the landscape below. The glow of the Milky Way illuminated dim shadows in the darkness, and she could have sworn she spotted a cluster of artificial shapes resting before a long strip like a vacuum. Cautiously, Rainbow briskly touched down. When she landed, it was with a clunking sound. Her hooves had struck a wooden platform. That's weird, she murmured, and in doing so, she realized how strongly her teeth was chattering. So, squatting down, she summoned a glove from a pendant and opened her saddlebag. Gathering a few twigs from nearby shrubbery, she started a tiny fire. After using the flint and steel, she added a few sticks to the blaze. Soon, she had a miniature bonfire blazing. The warmth of it soothed her more than any single lantern in all of New Ring ever could. She smiled and basked before it. In her peripheral vision, she caught more wooden platforms around her. She thought she sensed a rickety railing along with a tall pole dangling a flag. She could barely make out any important details. What's more, she could barely care. Drowsiness was overcoming her. She knew she had some bread in her bag that she spied from Governor Mintel's house. But that could wait until morning, when she would discover just where the heck she was. Rainbow Dash lowered her head into her forelimbs, closing her eyes and seeing the faint glimmer of lavender energy. When that faded, the only image that lingered was the flower gears and her brother hugging herself. In such a serene fashion, Rainbow fell asleep with a smile on her face.